Welcome to the Sydney International Guest Speakers Meeting for adult children of alcoholic and dysfunctional families, held on the second Sunday of September 2024. It gives me great pleasure to have Ken F. back at the Zoom mic to share his experience, strength and hope. His talk today is entitled Maintaining Life Balance in Recovery.
Good morning or good evening, everybody, wherever you may be, wherever you're coming from. I am Ken, and it feels so great to be back here. It's been a while, but I really appreciate the invite. It's really good to see some familiar faces. I have many roles in my life, and each role represents a different part of the balance that I maintain in my life. I'm a cyclist. But being a bicyclist is just one role and one part I play in my life. I balance that with work. I balance that with home and family. I've been asked to speak today on a topic, meaning that today's presentation is going to be a bit more of a didactic presentation than I've done in the past. It's always my hope that you walk away with something. I really want people to get a tidbit of wisdom or something from what I do. And if you walk away with just a little bit of information, I will be very happy. I'm normally a visual learner myself. And when I teach these concepts and principles at work, I have a huge dry erase board behind me, and I'm able to draw stuff. And there's a lot more visualization that I'm going to be doing today that's going to be more internal visualization, since I don't have the whiteboard and I don't trust myself to do screen sharing. So I want to start with a age-old question, and that's, do you prefer cake or pie? And also, if anybody would like to take notes, you can go grab a pen and paper now. I don't know if anybody noticed my shirt, but my shirt is a shirt of pies, pumpkin pies to be specific. Who in here likes cake over pie? Anybody prefer cake? How many people here prefer pie over cake? If we were doing this in person, I would like to give each of you a pie, and hopefully it would be your favorite pie, because the way I look at life balance, we all have one pie. We don't have a pie and a half. We don't have 3/4 of a pie. We all only have one complete pie, and it is our own responsibility to slice our pies in the ways that work best for us. So visualize that you have a pie, or at least you have a pie graph. Depending on how you slice your pie, each slice represents a life realm. Life realms are the areas we swim through and the roles that we have attached to them. When our slices are balanced and our pie is balanced, we feel secure, fulfilled, and happy. But when our slices are not balanced, we feel stressed or unbalanced. And this can typically lead to relapse to old behaviors or coping means, and what I call dark realms, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We're probably all in this room because we grew up in an environment where we didn't have balance. And we might not have had many realms. We might have been oppressed and kind of stuck in one huge piece of our pie, which would be our home growing up, or our community, if our community was dysfunctional. And this is one of the reasons why I really enjoy teaching this, because I think it's so important to kind of have a better grasp on what balance you can put in your life. We don't always have to be stuck in the same norm that we grew up with and what was familiar to us. Years ago, I used to run a residential recovery program for injection drug users who are also HIV positive and hepatitis C positive. And this was a part of the bigger project that we did there, which was called intimacy gramming. So this is part of the intimacy gram, if you've heard me talk about that before or at a different presentation. Whenever any of my upper phase or graduate patients would relapse, I would have them in group draw their pie on a dry erase board and show us what the balance or imbalance of that pie looked like prior to their relapse. It was always very revealing. You could always see which slice of the pie was starting to either become stressed, be full of drama and chaos. Maybe it was taking up the whole pie, meaning that slices that were recovery-based were no longer on the pie anymore. Hindsight is 20/20. But when you understand these concepts and you can start internalizing them, you can start looking for the stressors and the danger zones before they actually happen, and before you get so far into them that you resort back to the old coping tools. And I think it's really important to talk about balance among realms because our lives are always changing. We're usually moving from one trend to another, or maybe we're just stuck in a dysfunctional pattern and we're yearning for a transition to a better way of living. So let's look at the struggles and challenges that come with transition. For starters, I want to talk about kind of what happens during transition. And the most, I think, important and traumatic transition for many of us over the last few years was the COVID-19 pandemic. If you think about what kind of stability you had in your life prior to the pandemic, and then how quickly everything changed. First of all, we stopped being social. We were locked up. I know different countries had different ways of isolating. Some people had to be in a bubble with only, 6 other people. I know here locally, all the parks, everything was closed. It was a complete disruption. If you had any sense of structure with your schedule, that structure was probably thrown out the window. Many people had to adapt in changes in their income and their expenses. Here in the United States, you'd walk into a Walmart or other establishment, and all the toilet paper and paper towels and anything like that would be gone for months. So trying to pay for things that became more expensive, if you limited income coming in, that was a huge way of life prior to all of a sudden being cast in the pandemic. If you did get sick, you maybe had to experience your illness in isolation. People that we did socialize with, whether it be in person or virtually, which was a whole other way of adapting to life with the whole new virtual thing, was controversy. A lot of people either were very pro-vaccine or very against the vaccine. So there was a lot of controversy, and masks also kind of created the same division with a lot of people. And trying to adjust to wearing a mask. I remember I would be at work and I'd be walking down the hallway in the middle of the hospital and people would be staring at me and I wouldn't realize why they were staring until I got back to my office and realized I wasn't wearing my mask. August 11th marked the 1-year anniversary of when we no longer had to wear the masks. And I have to tell you, adjusting back to that new norm was a struggle for me. I'd say it took me at least 8 months to leave my office without a mask, without feeling naked or like I was forgetting something. Another way of adjusting to the pandemic, the transition, was maybe you had a strong reaction to the vaccine, or maybe you had the long-term COVID. And finally, this brought up a lot of trauma, fear, and grief for a lot of people. So the pandemic was just one really obvious time of transition for all of us. And I want to give you some other examples of other transitions that we tend to go through. Changing jobs, whether it be for the good or the bad, moving to a new location, having empty nest syndrome, or dealing with death, loss, or divorce, managing an injury, moving into substance abuse, or moving into recovery. So these are just examples of transitions. And like I say, if you look back in your life, you can probably look at different phases you went through and each transition that you went through in between those phases, and how easy were those transitions? Did you struggle, or were you able to maintain balance? So looking at life realms, which are the ways that we slice our pie, I want to talk about the benefits that we get through these realms. They can be social, they could be familial, raising kids, being connected to other family members, financially based, self-fulfillment, maybe challenge us, health or medical, legal, or personal. These are kind of the benefits that we get. And one of the reasons why we do transitions is sometimes we no longer receive a benefit from one of the realms that we're in, and it grows stale, and we need to grow and move on to a different realm. So that's kind of a natural progression with life. The categories that I like to use to name the slices are social. These are the slices where we are interacting with other people. Spiritual, these are the activities or life realm parts of our life where we're connecting with our higher power or the universe around us. Recreational, things that are maybe challenging ourselves physically or getting ourselves healthy or in shape. Vocational, educational, meaning that we're learning something, we're learning a skill, or we're making money, we're working to provide for ourselves. If we have any health concerns, we have a medical slice. Some of the people I work with get involved with the law, whether they get pulled over for drunk driving or something else, and they have legal problems. And then there's another slice that is just reconnecting with yourself or personal. And sometimes these realms overlap. If you belong to a hiking group and you go for a hike in the mountains with your friends, that could be social, that could be spiritual, that could be recreational. They can all tie in together. So just know that there's benefit and gains from having these different areas in our life. And I like to divide these slices into two types: the have-tos and the want-tos. The have-tos are the things that we have to do to sustain our standard of living. These are the things like getting up and going to work in the morning. If we have to work to get money, to put food on the table, and to pay for our rent or mortgage, this is something that we have to do. The want-tos are the things that bring us enjoyment and pleasure and fulfillment. And I always say, if you can make your job a want-to rather than a have-to, then you're ahead of the game there. But I really do think that we have to balance our pie with more want-tos than have-tos. We have to find enjoyment with life. Otherwise, we are bound by dread, depression, and really not getting the most out of our lives. And that's why I teach this, because I want everybody to get as much out of their lives as possible. And there's also the concept of self-esteem within realms. I know with ACA, most of us at our core have a strong sense of shame and abandonment. These are things that came out of early realms, our family, our childhood. And these are things that are deep in our core that we now carry into new relationships, new realms, new jobs. And I like people to challenge themselves to look at each of their realms and ask themselves, do they have good self-esteem in this realm or bad self-esteem? Because when you go home and you visit your family of origin, if they haven't done anything to correct their dysfunction, if they're still struggling with their everyday norms that you're trying to break away from, you might step into that and all of a sudden go back and shrink to having this zero self-esteem. But you might go to work and be at the top of your game. So I like to challenge people to look and see where their self-esteem is and where it lacks, because self-esteem really doesn't need to be all or nothing. And that's really important when you realize, hey, there's certain areas that I excel in. There's certain areas that I feel good about myself in. Because those are the things that we need to strive to add more to our lives with. Now, if I was doing this in person, one of the things that I would do is I would draw a circle on the board and I would draw what kind of a typical pie would look like. Most people in the United States, at least, work 40 hours a week. So a slice of the pie would be probably about 40% of the pie. 40 hours a week is a pretty good chunk of your weekly life. So work would be a big slice. Some people have a second job, which would be another slice. Some people go to school, which is another slice. Your recovery is a slice. If you go to church, if you belong to a bicycle club, if you belong to a hiking group, if you belong to a book club, all these things are different slices. And like I said, you only have one pie. So the more slices you try to put in your pie, the thinner each slice gets. Now, there's some of us that are very, very active people and we want to live life to the fullest. So we have a lot of slices in our life. And other people are very simple. They want to have a very calm, casual, simple life. And they might have fewer slices in their pie. There's no right way or wrong way to do this. You have to slice your pie what works best for you, because we are all special, we are all unique, and we all will have a different pie. So we don't need to compare our slices with other people. However, if we know that other people are busy doing things that we would love to do, we can challenge ourselves to add those slices to our own life. And depending on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, that's where the reconnecting with yourself personal slice comes in. Because if you are an extrovert, you get charged up being around other people. So you don't need a lot of time to regroup and spend by yourself. So your reconnecting with yourself slice might be a lot smaller. If you're an introvert, somebody who gets drained being around a lot of people and needs more downtime to recharge your batteries and reconnect with yourself, you might need more time. And I think it's really important to understand who you are and what you need, because I work with a lot of people that are very much extroverts, and when they allow themselves too much downtime to be with themselves, they get into trouble. So it's important to know which side of the coin you fall on. Some people are right down the middle, which is called an ambivert. And today we are also looking at a fourth type of personality, which is called a textrovert, which is somebody who pretty much gets their socialization through texting or social media. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I want you, if you have a piece of paper, to kind of scratch out what your pie would look like. I always ask people, do it realistically. This isn't anything you're doing for me. This is doing something for yourself to see if your life is sliced the way that you want it to be sliced, because you might have more time and energy into doing things that you really don't want to do, more time and energy into doing things that you're doing for other people's benefits and not your own. And being able to look at it and see it is kind of the visual roadmap to ask yourself, is this really how you want your pie to be? Maybe you could draw a second pie, which would be your ideal pie. What would you ideally want it to look like? And then it's up to you to find out, how do you restructure your life so that you can integrate the new pie, which hopefully would be a lot more balanced and help you function a lot better. I have three types of slices that I call dark realms. These are life realms that are not conducive to creating recovery. They are not conducive to creating intimacy. And it's really important to understand these, because when we see these pop up on our pie, it's important to look at how do we need to shrink these down or get rid of them. The first dark realm is substance abuse or addiction. If you find yourself spending a lot of time drinking, if you find yourself doing some type of behavior with substances that maybe is starting to make you isolate, maybe it's keeping you from doing activities that you would normally be doing, maybe you have more time now that you're spent recovering from this use, or maybe this use is now starting to pollute other realms. Maybe it's starting to affect your job, maybe it's starting to affect your marriage or your family. So it's very important to make sure that you clean your pie of any type of substance use or addiction. And it doesn't have to be substance use for the addiction. It could be gambling. It could be eating. It could be anything you do, as I call it, alcoholically. I know some people that get so busy working on their house that they lose track of time. They stay up until midnight without eating because they get so busy into a project and they lose track of everything else. So what they're doing is they're doing home improvement alcoholically, and it becomes kind of an addiction at that point. So not good. Balance is the key. The second dark realm is an absence of a slice. Let's say you were dealing with an addiction or a behavior that wasn't working well for you, and it took up 15% of your pie. So your slice is 15%. And when you stop that behavior, you replace it with 10% of AA or NA or ACA, but you still have 5% that you haven't replaced it yet. And you haven't replaced it yet, and there's a big question mark in that slice because it is an empty void, and that void is called boredom. Boredom is another intimacy killer and recovery killer. When we get bored, we end up going back to doing the dysfunctional patterns and things that are familiar to us. So boredom is the second dark realm. The third dark realm is codependency. And codependency is when a person becomes an entire slice for you. Now, you can live with your partner, and your partner would maybe fit in your home slice, and your neighbors might fit in there too. But if the only person in the home with you is your spouse or maybe a family member, that's not the same as codependency because they fit into a slice. They are not the slice. But if everything that has to do with that slice has to do with that person, then that is how I define codependency. Those are the dark realms. There's a gray realm that I have since added, and the gray realm is something that can be dark or not, and that is social media. Social media can be very, very addicting. It used to be television. We used to call television the drug with the plug. And it seems like YouTube and Netflix, all this has replaced television, and it's quite easy to go down the rabbit hole. Those programs and algorithms are designed to keep you connected, just like a cigarette is designed to keep you addicted. So be very careful with the amount of social media that you spend your time watching. Because when you sit down and you start watching that social media, you're not out living life, you might not be connecting with other people, and you might not be getting the sleep that you need. So drafting out your pie is going to help you gain a better insight on what's working in your life and what's not working for your life, and also give you a better understanding on how to cope. I want to talk a little bit about how I managed to keep my slices balanced when COVID hit, because that was like one of the biggest transitions that I went through. At my job, where I see people all day long, whether in individual or group therapy, we were told one day that no more than 24 people in the group room, which was like, we never have 24 people in a group room, no big deal. A few days later, it turned into 12 people. And then the next day, our doors were closed. It's like, what do? We were told, call people. In my mind, I thought this was only going to last 2 weeks. But towards the end of the second week, I realized that we were all in this for the long haul, and I became really depressed. And I think I had my first real strong wake up with all this when I did my first intake over the phone. And I had somebody I couldn't see. This was just a voice on the other end, and this person was extremely depressed. And I wasn't even sure if this person was suicidal or not. I could just hear the despair in their voice. And my anxiety went through the roof because I was expecting to hear a gunshot at any second. So you can imagine going from my comfort level of having somebody in a controlled environment where I can see them, and if I know that they're suicidal, I can sit with them, I can do whatever I need to do to get them the help they need, to just being on the phone with somebody, and that phone could go dead at any minute. Going to the gym has been a big part of my life. It's part of my structure, and all the gyms closed. So that was a big loss for my routine. And I also grew up in a household where I had a parent who had a kidney transplant and was on anti-rejection medication. So anytime somebody sneezed in the house or sniffled, all of a sudden there was this hysteria, you're going to kill me, you're going to kill me. And there was a lot of this in the world with COVID-19, and it brought up a lot of stuff from my past. And I really fought to buy into that because I'm not saying that I didn't think COVID was real, but I didn't want to have the same paranoia that I grew up with in my house. Now, I managed my depression. Once I realized that I was depressed, once I realized that, hey, things aren't going to change here. This is going to be here for a while. I was able to look at my pie and all of a sudden rearrange some of the pieces so that it would be workable. And I managed my depression by working on adapting to the new normal. Without being able to go to the gym, I took up running a couple miles a day. My whole goal was I wanted to be able to do a 10K. I continued to ride my bicycle to work on the days that I was still working in the office. And I continued to go kayaking with my friends. I can't think of a better way to apply social distancing and interact with other people than sitting out in the open on the water in a kayak. Because if you get too close to somebody, you're going to whack them in the head with a paddle. Now, this wasn't necessarily an ideal lifestyle, but I was able to take my pie that had been turned upside down and give it some semblance of balance. And after being cut off from some friends just never came back. Some friends ghosted me. Some friends just got very involved in other things during the pandemic. They created new slices for themselves. And I can understand this, and I can live with this. And that really helped me with adapting to this. And now that things are going back to kind of a new normal, things aren't 100% back to the way they were. I'm still doing a lot of virtual stuff at work. But I think I've been more resilient and other people have been more resilient. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when they became homebound, filled that negative slice with substance abuse. So I'm talking to a lot of people now who never had any substance use problems before the pandemic that are now coming in. And a friend of mine, her brother relapsed during the pandemic. He lived in a small city in the middle of nowhere, and all the AA meetings were closed, and he didn't do virtual, and he ended up relapsing and dying from alcoholism. And as my friend puts it, he was another person who died of COVID because this just affected us in so many different ways and still continues to affect us. But how do we balance our life and look forward and move forward? And that's what I like to focus on. Now, looking at the pie can also be important when working the 12 steps. When I work the 12 steps with people and I walk them through the steps, I usually have them do an intimacy diagram and do their pie chart before working the steps. Because with step one, you can look at the different realms and try to find the areas where you are powerless and have unmanageability. Might be your whole pie, might just be part of your pie. but looking at the areas of your life that you don't have the manageability. And sometimes I have people actually do pies that are representative more to what they would have looked like when they were growing up, and kind of connecting the dots. What is left over from the past that is still infecting the present? In step 2 and 3, I asked, do any of the realms contain any form of spirituality? You know, where is the spirituality? What is the spirituality? When does the spirituality arise, or when do you practice the spirituality? What is the connection? In steps 4 and 5, reflect on present and past realms that are still influencing you, looking and seeing if there's any resentments within any of the people within the realms. And step 6 and 7, are there any realms where character defects and survival traits or laundry list traits still exist? Sometimes we might be in an area, like I said, where we have really good self-esteem. And that's something that we can say, hey, you know, laundry list traits don't pop up here. But what realms do you still need to do some fine-tuning with that? In steps 8 and 9, that's more the factors of intimacy. That is a part of the intimacy-gram and not so much the life realms and balance. But in steps 10, 11, and 12, examining and maintaining the balance of your pie. So working my steps 10, 11, and 12 and keeping my side of the street clean and trying to make sure that I'm in good standing every day with my higher power and the world around me. Part of that is making sure that I'm also keeping my pie in balance. And when I notice that there's an imbalance, to ask myself, what am I in control of? And what am I not in control of? And believe me, I say the ACA Serenity Prayer all the time. If you're working the Loving Parent Guidebook, you can also use these realms when you're in the middle of the workbook. What realms is your loving parent present in? And this can be in different forms. This could be loving parent present for yourself, or maybe your loving parent present for other people. Because we might know how to nurture our children, we might know how to nurture our grandchildren. So loving parent might be present, but we might not be exercising the loving parent guidance for our own self. And who fills your primary realms? If it's not your loving parent, is it your inner child? Is it your inner teenager? Is it your critical parent? Or there's another entity, another part that I don't think is in the Loving Parent Guidebook, but I know it exists in me, and that is my inner adult. And my inner adult is somebody who is just very logical. This is the part that gets something done. This is the part of me today that said, okay, it's getting hot. You need to pull over in the shade and you need to rest for a couple of minutes and you need to drink more water. That's logical. The part of me that said, you know, you're really hot and you need to find air conditioning. Why don't you go to one of your favorite restaurants and relax there and enjoy your time there with some nice food? That would be my loving parent. But the inner adult is just very black and white, very, very logical. So who fills your primary realms? And this whole thing that I'm talking about today with the realms is a part of a bigger diagram called the intimacy-gram, which is intimacy diagramming. And it's looking at two different planes. It's looking at the quality of your relationships and looking at the life balance, which is what we're talking about in here today. When you have the diagram, it's almost like picking up your phone and turning on your GPS, because if you're lost or you want direction, you look at the GPS, there's a little blue dot right in the middle, which is you, and then you can see what's around you and where you need to go. And that's pretty much the same thing with your pie. Looking at your pie, if it's not in balance, what's the direction you need to take to get it in balance? What's the direction you need to take to fill your slices with your loving parent and to remove the laundry list traits and survival traits from your slices? So I hope this can help you. And I think at this point in time, if you would like to turn off the recording, we can open this up for some questions and then open sharing. And thank you for letting me be of service.